Shalom Yerushalayim. Zeu shari Rashechem.
Shalom, everyone, and nearly Shabbat Shalom. Today is Friday. Today is September the 13th, and today is also the 10th day of the Hebrew month of Elul. And as we said on previous videos, we said that the month of Elul is a month dedicated for a preparation. We prepare ourselves for the high holiday season, before Rosh Hashanah, the new year, before Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. In order to come before God on those days, we have to be very clean. And this time of the year is a time in which we dedicate to cleanse ourselves from the inside. Reading the weekly portions of these weeks, as we said on previous videos, may be done according to the context in which the portions are given, but we can also read it in another context. This weekly portion starts on chapter 21, verse 10. And it starts with when you shall, or if you go to battle against your enemy, or when you go to battle against your enemy. And then there are all sorts of guidelines, restrictions, regulations in terms of how to go on a war. It's important to say there are two types of wars that Torah is including. One is a mandatory war. It's a war that we don't make any sort of self-consideration or judgment, whether it's a good one or a bad one, whether it's a justified one or not. This kind of war, which is mandatory, it's a war that the Lord is sending us, and this is not against our enemies, it is against God's enemies. For example, the war against the Amalekites. The Amalekites are the enemies of the Lord, and we are instructed, we are committed to go to fight against them and to annihilate them, and not extinguish darkness from the world. That's in a mandatory war. The war that we are reading about here in our portion is not a mandatory one. It's an optional one. We have the ability to choose whether we want to go and fight against another nation for strategic reasons, or maybe there's a potential threat coming from the region, or anything or any kind of consideration that we might have. Of course, going to fight involves inquiring of the Lord, inquiring in the breastplate. There used to be prophets involved, etc., etc. It's a long process, but in the very end, this is about a war which is not mandatory for us. And the regulations, the guidelines you read about later after verse 10 in chapter 21 are about that kind of a war, not a war against the Lord's enemies, in which we are committed to extinguish darkness entirely. We could read the portion in that context, but we could also read it in the context of us now cleansing ourselves before Rosh Hashanah, before the new year, before Day of Atonement, and say when you go to war against your enemy, it's not about a physical enemy necessarily. It's not about a human enemy. It could also be the enemy. And the book of Deuteronomy has all these portions, as we said on the previous video, it has all these portions that have little sound bites for us, little tips during this time of the year in terms of how to behave and how to cleanse ourselves and how to go about this exactly, and to remember how important that is. We read about previous portions talking about the mouth as the organ of speech, the ears as the organ of hearing, the eyes as the organ of seeing, and then saying to us last week, officers and judges you shall appoint in all your gates. Now we see something similar when you go to fight against your enemy, when you go to battle against your enemy, and then everything that follows may be read in that context, and with the guidelines in terms of how to prepare ourselves. So may we prepare ourselves in the right way. May we prepare the way. May we come clean before Him on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which is a little bit more than 3 weeks from now. Shabbat Shalom.